All right, everyone, good morning. Welcome to our April I Am Tech Oregon interview, sponsored by First Tech Federal Credit Union. I'm Ruthie Ditzler. I'm TAO's Marketing and Regional Programs Coordinator, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm the moderator for the 2021 I Am Tech Oregon series. And I'm really excited to be part of today's discussion as part of Startup Month at TAO. So April, we are featuring startups that are part of our ecosystem, and our guest today is a founder of one of those startups. So I have two members of the TAO team with me here today, Justin Martinez and Kara Toronto. Justin does an incredible job keeping our virtual events running behind the scenes, and Kara is here to connect with folks in the chat. A couple reminders before we start. This group is really small, and we can definitely have a very open, candid conversation. But in general, we start the participants on mute, and we ask that folks remain on mute unless a TAO staff member unmutes you. If you have any questions for Andre, you can post them in the chat, or you can unmute and ask them throughout the conversation, and then we'll also do some live Q&A at the end. And if you're feeling excited or you want to support Andre as he's sharing his story, we encourage you to use the participant icon on your screen to applaud, give a thumbs up, etc. This is a really quick event. A half an hour is going to speed by, but we are going to save some time. We'll likely use Mentimeter at the end to do some live Q&A. It'll be an opportunity to ask questions in a more interactive manner. And we'll reshare these access details later on. And I encourage you to engage with TAO on social media. There's a human behind TAO social media. It's me. And I always love to see key takeaways that participants post about our events, or if they're sharing their own events. Just love to interact with people on social. And now it is my pleasure to welcome our April I Am Tech Oregon guest, Andre Petett, the founder and CEO of Fundamental Fitness Labs. Welcome, Andre.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so to kick us off, as we already mentioned, you are the CEO and founder of Fundamental Fitness Labs. Can you share a little bit more about yourself and kind of give us the story of how you ended up in the career you find yourself in today?
Yep. So I'm, I guess, a rare Portland native, right? Grew up here, went to high school at Jesuit, went to Berkeley, and then back to U of O. And then down to Santa Clara for graduate school. So I've stayed on the West Coast most of my business and personal career life. And really, Fundamental Fitness Labs just came out of a desire to be helpful, right? I mean, I've been in the fitness industry on a personal level for my entire life, and I was fortunate enough to have a father that was extremely focused on fitness, and so he taught me a lot growing up, and I got to watch him do his routine. In fact, I think I shared with you, he started, I don't know if I shared this part, he stopped eating meat back when I was in junior high, right? So, and we used to go to Nature's when it was down on Corbett before it even became this big place. It was just this little tiny store. So I've always had that, and he's always been kind of that inspiration, but the rest of my family and a lot of my friends were not doing as well, right? And so over time, the more I saw the industry and the more I was looking at, how can people actually learn how to be healthy? There's really no one teaching that, right? I mean, there's a lot of things being taught right now, but from an institutional standpoint, no one's really teaching people good, healthy habits. So over the last 8 to 10 years, this company has evolved into what it is today. So.
Yeah, that's a super cool story. The part that I remember you telling me about your father is that he still does 300 push-ups a day.
Yeah,
right?
It's insane. Well, and the worst part about it is that when I commented, like, are you kidding me? His response was, well, I only do 75 at a time.
Right.
Like, who says that,
I've talked to, since we spoke earlier this week, I think I've talked to like 5 people about that. And I just as part of my life goals, I'm like, I would love to just be able to do 30 push-ups, let alone 300.
So, right. So yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's part of, his process is part of our philosophy, which this is a long-term thing, right? he didn't start doing 300 push-ups day one.
Yep.
He's actually cut it back, which is scary to think about. But you know, I guess when you turn 80, you got to back off your workouts. So,
it's so impressive.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So I love the background, sharing a little bit about, you know, I think what you're saying, like that, like actual tangible, helpful, like information that folks need to make choices about their fitness, and just wanting to support folks around that. And I'm curious, you know, you talked a little bit when we spoke earlier this week about the planning to launch, right? Pre-COVID. So I'm curious, you know, how has COVID impacted the launch of Fundamental Fitness Labs, and has the pandemic caused you to pivot or change your business model at all?
Yeah. So it has a little bit. It's funny. We've always been technology focused from a back end standpoint, right? Collecting data and analyzing people's processes, and what we talk about a lot in our team meetings is that we're using data to help our clients become more successful, right? So we're analyzing everyone's stuff so people can become successful, not so that we can sell them things, right? And so that was always the case. The difference is that we were really a high touch. Our process is evaluate, recommend, and follow up, right? So we get people in the door, we do an evaluation on them, a basic fundamental, you know, first thing we do is structure, right? Because if you don't have a proper structure, then whatever we build is going to be a problem. And so that part was always going to be face-to-face. Well, you know, our plan was to launch last March on the face-to-face side, and obviously that didn't work out, right? So we've had to pivot dramatically into being able to do all our evaluations virtually, right? Which was a lot of just kind of mental things for me, because I'm a hands-on face-to-face guy. And so now I'm like, what? We got to do this virtually? How's that going to work, right? And I kept thinking, oh, we'll just wait because this isn't going to last forever. And then, you know, 2 or 3 months in, we're like, hey, that's not gonna work. So we made that change to where we can now do everything visually on a call, and we're still working on the back end, because now you got to figure out how do you do security on video, which takes up a lot of space, right? So that's not my problem, that's my IT guy's problem, right? So that's fun. And then the other thing is we really were looking at launching initially as again, because my background has been in sales, a lot of it's been retail, we were looking at individuals. We're going to do organizational wellness. We really have a bend for community wellness, right? And those are very important, but they weren't going to be our focal point. After the situation with COVID, a lot of companies have really changed their attitude about corporate wellness and community wellness, right? And other organizations, whether they're universities or not-for-profits. And so I think that really was, it kind of brought the community wellness and the corporate into the forefront of what we're doing, which was a definite change as well. So there's a couple places where we changed, but because everything is virtual now, you know, doing an organizational program and then doing all the follow-up is a lot easier because you can do it by Zoom, right? As opposed to having to travel everywhere and getting people into a room, and how many people can you fit in a room? Now we could literally have, company has 1,000 people, we could do everyone on a call at once, right? Which never could happen before. So there's been a lot of upside for us. I think long-term, it's gonna be a huge benefit, sadly enough, I guess, at some level, right? Because people are really a lot more concerned about their health than they were in the past. You know, our focus is how do you prevent the chronic diseases, right? Diabetes and blood pressure, things. 75, I found this out recently, and it just blew me away, but 75% of people that go to the hospital are going for chronic preventable diseases.
Wow.
75%, and that's a lot of traffic that's not necessary, right? And so that's our focus. And so how do you help people really, again, create habits to change? Because it's a habit thing, right? It's what and as I told you before, I had a great idea to share with people that diet is a noun, not a verb, right? It's what you eat. And if you need to adjust that, that's great. But going on a diet is not necessarily sustainable. So that's really, for us, the biggest changes were, you know, being able to do everything virtually, which also means we can do things nationally now that we wouldn't have been able to do. We'd have to, you know, move people places. Now we don't have to do that. So it's been helpful from a long-term perspective, but you know, the last year has been interesting to say the least.
Yeah.
So
I can imagine. It'll be, you know, over the next few years, really interesting to see how the telehealth industry kind of evolves now that it seems like now that it's here and people are really able to use it and take advantage of the convenience, you know, I hope that it makes health more accessible for more people.
Yeah.
So some, you know, innovation, some good changes.
Yep.
Okay, so throughout your career, I'm curious, you know, with the series with I Am Tech Oregon, you know, we are here to explore people's personal stories and their identity. And I'm curious, have you seen yourself represented, you know, among your peers, among leadership, among startup founders? How has your identity kind of played a role in your career?
Yeah. So the short answer is not really, right? As far as whether it's in the startup community, and in, you know, C-suite environments, especially in Portland, right? Portland's not a real diverse environment to begin with. What I think is interesting, going back to the COVID impact, though, is I've been connecting with people nationwide, because if someone's like, there's a group in Austin that do events virtually now because they can't do them in person. Well, I wasn't going to Austin to their event, but now I'm making connections with people because it's a Zoom call, I can get on it, right? And so I think that has changed that dramatic quite a bit, which has been interesting, right? So I think that's creating more of an opportunity to meet people outside my normal network, if you will. So that's been helpful. But in a general sense, it's been, and I think a lot of founders, regardless of their backgrounds, find that so if you're doing something new, you're just kind of on an island because no one else is doing what you're doing, right? So you know, it's hard to find folks that are doing the same thing. And we've been fortunate to really build a magnificent team over the last 18 months. And so that's been helpful, quite helpful. So
yeah. And kind of along those lines, you know, each time we run this program, I always ask people about imposter syndrome. And you had a couple really interesting thoughts just about experiencing imposter syndrome.
Yeah. And I think, again, that it kind of goes hand in hand. So for someone to feel, I think, that they don't belong somewhere, they have to, in my opinion, they have to be kind of in a place where they're beyond their skill set, or they're feeling they might be beyond their skill set. They're in a place where they can, they have an opportunity to fail, right? And in my career experience in sales mainly, but in the other business endeavors I've been involved in, I've been overqualified for the position way more than I've been close to my limit. I think this position, obviously running this business, is the first time I've been in this place, but again, it's something I've been doing a long time, right? So I really enjoy the health side of it, and my sales background makes it so I'm not concerned about talking to people about the business. So I've never experienced it. I remember when I told you when I was on the call, I think it was Ibrahim's call, and you asked that question, I was like, oh wow, I hear that a lot. It's just not, I don't know if that's an unfortunate thing, right? That I've not experienced that, but I've never really been in that place to be that far ahead of myself, if you will. And I think part of that, we talk about opportunities, right, in business, and as an African American male, there's not a lot of times where someone's going to just take a huge risk on you, frankly, and that changes. That's an environment thing. So not all environments are that way, but in a general sense, I've not experienced that. And you see it like even in the VC world, where African American women are some of the largest group of individuals starting businesses, and they get 1%, 1/10 of 1% of VC money.
Yeah.
So there's a disconnect there. And I was interesting. I was at an event. They were talking about how do you raise money, and one of the things they said is people invest with people they're comfortable with, right? So if you have, and most VC folks don't look like me, and so they're not necessarily comfortable with someone that does, right? And so you have to do a lot of extra work to bridge that gap, and I'm not always willing to do that extra work. So that's yeah.
I'm curious, so kind of talking about the transition, you mentioned your background in sales. I'm curious, like, how your career has evolved from, I think you originally started in finance. So finance to sales, to like, what made you make the move into like being like, okay, I'm going to do the entrepreneur thing and launch a startup?
I started actually in the entrepreneur world back in college. So I was helping some folks who were starting a music business. And that was interesting. It was fun. And so that was my first kind of delve into entrepreneurship, and I got super excited about it. And I think I have a very independent streak, I guess you could say, to myself. So being in sales was a good fit because you really are in charge of your own time and your own energy, and you get a task and you go do it, right? And it's people aren't really looking over your shoulder unless you don't make your budget, right? If you don't make budget, they're really curious about what you weren't doing. But if you're making budget every month, people kind of leave you alone to just keep doing that thing, right? Because you're driving revenue for the business. So it's kind of a natural tend. And then coming back around to Fundamental Fitness Labs, again, it just came to me, the corporate world wasn't working, even in the sales environment wasn't working for what I wanted from a opportunity standpoint. And then this really just kind of drugged me in, to be honest. The passion behind really helping people just made it that we had to start a business in it because there's no one else doing it, right? I mean, if you look at, one of the guys on our team said, if you look at the landscape of fitness, there's, the plate of information is just overflowing, right? But a lot of it's not very good, right? And so how do people make the right decisions, and who's there to help? And again, there's no institutions that are like, hey, we're here. When I was growing up, we had PE class. They don't have PE anymore, right? So like kids don't get a foundation of health or wellness because they're not experiencing it on a daily basis as little people, right? We got to see every different kind of activity to figure out what we like to do, right? And that's not really, that's not happening anymore. So
like they don't have PE anymore pre-COVID or just because of COVID?
Even pre-COVID, a lot of Portland public schools weren't doing PE.
Wow.
They only have so much money, so what are we not going to do? And PE is not a class, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Wow, I didn't know that. I clearly don't have school-aged children.
Right. I think they start kind of doing a little bit of it in high school, but by then, you're like, if you don't have habits by then, what the heck are we doing?
Yeah, no kidding. Wow, that's even just to like have it's about like the mental health part of it too. It's not just the physical exercise, but to have a break from like what you're doing in school all day. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it might not be nationwide, but it is here in Portland.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I think, over the years, there's definitely been like increased use of technology, like all of these statistics about how much time, young people are not active. So whether they're getting that in school or out of school, I mean, it's definitely been a shift.
Yeah, I watched it with my older son as he went through that. Basically, the young people that were in sports were active and everyone else was not.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Well, yeah, that's interesting. So I love that there's just, it's really cool to talk to startup founders about this. Like, it's like this thing doesn't exist, so I'm just going to create it, right? It's the innovation and the drive to be like, well, I'm going to, plug that hole and create this thing. And yeah, I think I always am curious, like how people, I spent a long time working with high school students, and I'm always curious how people's careers just sort of like, you can never really predict where someone's going to end up in high school. And I always try to tell people that. So speaking of careers, like what's your favorite thing about what you do right now?
Help, I guess at the end of the day, the ability to help people. I mean, I think what's interesting, and we talk about this with our team group, our leadership group, is that we all understand over half the group has experience helping people individually, right, with their wellness, and we're all very successful, right? I have a friend of mine that I've been working with for a while that has gone from barely making it a mile when we go to run and thinking that was the worst thing ever to now he's pushing us to 6 miles and thinking we could go further, right? And it's taken 3 years, right? He didn't do it the first week. And I think, so as a team, we understand that we can get people where they need to go individually, but how do you do it at scale? And that's what really been exciting, is the group really coming together to figure out how to scale what we're doing and help people on, by the thousands and eventually the millions versus just onesie twosie. So that's it. It's exciting to get together with folks with like-minded, right? That have different backgrounds that we can mesh. So, I'd say the ability to help, but also just our team is just a lot of fun. It really is a good group.
That's awesome. Okay, so we'll do a couple more. I think we have 4 questions already that have come in from the audience, but I'm curious to know, one, if you have one best career decision, anything you can think of in particular that you that kind of set you on your path that stands out?
Yeah, I think, again, I was a finance major. You know, I've spent a lot of time, I started reading the Wall Street Journal as a young person, kind of like Alex P. Keaton, if anyone remembers Family Ties, right? So that was an odd thing. And so I've always, you know, that was my bent, and I worked on some different environments in there. But when I got into sales, it was not by choice necessarily. It just happened, if you will. And that's probably the best decision career-wise that I ever made. And it was completely unintentional, you know, because that drives revenue. It drives everything in your business. And when I was working at involved with the OBI, I did actually a seminar on sales, because so many founders have no concept of that process. And it's what's going to make or break their business. You can have a great idea, but if you can't get out to people, it doesn't matter. And if people are excited about it, but you can't close the deal, it still doesn't matter. And so that was clearly the best decision I made. And it's, you know, I've enjoyed it. Not everyone likes it, obviously, for lots of reasons, but yeah, I definitely enjoy it.
Great. And then what about like mentors? Have you had anyone that's influenced you, with the startup? Anyone in particular?
Yeah. You know, we talked about this a little bit. Interesting enough for me, early on, my mentors were my parents, right? I mean, I was fortunate enough to have, my mom was very upwardly mobile and did a lot of different things within the not-for-profit community, right? And ended up at one point she was running adult and family services for the state of Oregon, and then she ran the International Fellows Program for Kellogg's. And so I got to watch her and kind of see that. But she was always in the public sector or in, you know, not-for-profit world, right? So from a business standpoint, I really didn't have anybody that I could look to in that regard. So I got great habits from my parents, right? My father taught me some, you know, and this is kind of going back to the imposter syndrome. You know, one of the things my dad taught me early on is everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time. You know, I was a little kid, right? And I always had a voice. So if I had a problem, I could tell them. So if you're a little kid talking to a grown person, then when you grow up, it's like, well, shoot, I can talk to anybody, right? And so, but just that everyone puts their pants on one leg at a time thing was just really powerful. Right. So he says, if you meet someone that puts their pants on both legs at a time, they're special and you should act that way. Right. But everyone else is the same, whether they're the president or a street person, they're the same. They're all human beings. Right. And so that was really helpful. And then recently, in the last couple of years, I met a couple gentlemen in particular that have been very instrumental in us pivoting and making the right decisions. And that was real helpful. So yeah, I have a couple now, but that's been like just after we got started, you know, and as we were kind of moving, and they really helped. You know, like I said, one of the gentlemen, I think I told you, I said some things that I was going to do. He's like, "You really want to say that?" I'm like, "Oh, that's not a good thing to say." And he's like, "Probably not," you know. And I'm like, "All right," you know. So, and I learned in sales, you know, if you're going to ask people for advice, you got to be coachable. So, you know, if they're going to tell you something, you might want to listen to it, right? So that was real good. So yeah, so it's been exciting lately to be able to have folks that I can really look to that in that way.
That's great. Yeah, I guess that's like, I think there's probably a lot of times when people ask for advice, but then they don't really want to hear what you have to say.
Like, so, no, I didn't want to hear that. I'm not gonna, no, that's not the advice I was looking for, you know?
Totally.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to switch over to looking at the questions that have come in from the audience just in the last few minutes that we have here. Okay, so question from the audience. What do you see as the next step in the digital transformation of fitness and diet? And if you can work out from your home, does that remove barriers or just create new ones?
Yeah. And I think, you know, I think the first thing when you talk about transformation, digital transformation, right? I mean, the name of our company is Fundamental Fitness Labs. And I think one of the challenges we have as a country is we're always looking for the next big thing, the next new thing. And fundamentals are just that, right? And so, it'd be interesting. I think maybe we'll be that digital transformation back to fundamentals. But I think that part's interesting. The new app's not going to solve your problem if you're already having issues doing it on your own, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's the same with diet. I mean, there's just so much information out there. You know, one of the things I think I might have said before, but your diet's a noun, not a verb.
Right.
Right. So let's focus on what we're eating and figure that out. I mean, and sadly enough, people eat a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily food, and it sounds kind of weird, but a lot of processed food is being made chemically now, which is kind of crazy to think about. So, and then on the work from home thing, I think that depends on the person. You know, so many people cannot work from home, much less work out from home. right? Everything else becomes more important. Like, oh my gosh, the house is so messy. I'll do that first, then I'll work out. Or, oh my gosh, I got to do these dishes. Or, right, whatever it is that we put in front of it, or just work. I mean, really just being that busy. But so I know, like, even some people on our team had some challenges because they're so used to going to the gym, and they're fitness people, but that's their space. That's where they do it, and then trying to transfer that to home. So I think the barrier is more like is a mental one. If you have the discipline, quote, right, or the things you do or things you can actually do at home, right? If you're lifting free weights, most people don't have a free weight gym, right? And so how are you going to adapt that to what's able at home? Because it seems like you're closer, right? You don't have the travel time, so it shouldn't be a problem. That doesn't seem to be the barrier, right? So it's kind of interesting because I know a lot of folks. In fact, there was a thing that came up that a lot, obviously, COVID, a lot of people gain weight, and millennials gain more weight than anybody.
Wow.
And as we were talking about it, we realized because if you're not going out to see people and going out to do stuff and being out doing things, you're not moving the way you used to move.
Yeah.
And we don't count that as exercise, but it still burns calories. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So.
I was going to say that, I just wear a little Fitbit every day, and I definitely noticed a dramatic drop in my daily steps. Just,
oh, wow.
Because, I would be commuting and taking public transportation and then walking a little bit, to and from the office every morning. And just that is something,
That all adds up, right? And we don't even, and again, that's that thing we don't think about. The basics, the simple things of increasing movement doesn't mean you got to start, quote, exercising. Just means you got to find other ways to move. And that could just be going for a walk. That could be incremental walks because you're, again, taking public transportation. So you're walking down to the bus or the train, you're getting on, you're getting off, you're going in between places. Like you said, that does add up, especially not just in the day. You think about it over the course of a month or a year.
Yep.
How many less steps you actually took. It's probably phenomenal.
Yeah. Okay. I know the question. Let's see. Someone asked, I have to know, are you also a vegetarian? And what is your favorite healthy meal?
I am not a vegetarian. My wife is. I am not. And my father still technically eats fish. He hasn't eaten anything but fish in 30 years now, which is, 40 years? Oh my God. Okay, that's scary. But I'm not, I don't eat a lot of meat, but I definitely am not a vegetarian, right? I still, and my favorite healthy meal. That's hard because my wife's such a fabulous cook. She does all sorts of good stuff. Yeah, I'd have to say that'd be a tough one to answer. I mean, I'd have to think about that because I like a lot of stuff. If I go out to eat food, I guess it would be sushi and sashimi, right? So, but in the house, yeah, again, she's making up a whole bunch of goodies.
That's lucky. That's awesome.
Yeah. Now, if I find an answer, I can type it in when I respond.
Sounds good. All right. So the concept for fundamental fitness labs resonates with me. Curious what baseline health data would be tracked and provided to a user of the service.
Yeah, that's awesome. So 2 parts of that. One is we really look at our role as co-navigating. So although we're providing information to you, we really are working with you on that information. Right, because I think a lot of the fitness apps are collecting data and giving you data, but if you don't know how to analyze it yourself, what good is it? I mean, it seems to be kind of so that's the first side. On the other side, yeah, we track. So the first thing we're looking at, there's what I call 8 fundamentals, right? So, and the basic things like strength, balance, flexibility, nutrition, recovery, right? Form. And so we look at all those different things in different ways. Our initial evaluation is about structure. So we look at, what your posture's like. If you do an overhead squat, what things shift and can you even squat? Can you get down to the ground and back up? That's actually a longevity test that people have done over the years, right? And then we're looking, so that's from a physical standpoint. So we look at those and we test, when we look at flexibility, it's in rotation. Like, can your body rotate? It's really the joints, right? So can your body rotate? Can your hips rotate? I met a guy a while back that said they actually have tests in nursing homes for daily, activities of daily living and different things to see if you can have those. And my thought was, okay, so there's a system for that when we get old. Why don't we look at that when we're in our 20s and 30s so we know what we need to do to make sure when we are in our 70s and 80s, we actually can function, right? And so, so we look at those different types of things. And I have actually kind of a chart that has that, so I can share that with you because it's totally cool. I think it's neat. So when people are interested, that'd be something they could see, you know, just the different things we track. And so, yeah, so then we give that information, and it really is, we try to minimize the recommendations to 1 or 2 at a time so that people don't get overwhelmed, but they still see all the things that we see, right? So when our lady who's got a kinesiology and physical therapy background does their initial evaluation, she's commenting on the toes and the legs and all the different things because they, you know, as we learned as little kids, right? The knee bone's connected to the hip bone. Right? And you might have a problem in your shoulder that's actually caused by your ankle, which sounds ridiculous, but it's actually true. So those are the ways that we do that. But I can definitely look at. And then the other thing that we're looking to improve are what we call, and there was a book written on it a number of years ago, the biomarkers, right, for aging. And there's about 9 of them that really. And what's interesting is weight's not in there. Body weight doesn't, right? It's body fat percentage, lean muscle mass, heart rate, blood pressure. Those are the kinds of things that determine how long you're going to live. Technically, how much you weigh is irrelevant if you have the right body mass, if you have the right muscle mass and body fat percentage.
Interesting.
Right. And again, as a society, all we focus on is that one thing that's really not as relevant, you know, because we don't know any better. Again, that's what we get told to talk. It's like we talk about calories instead of nutrients. In our food, right?
Yeah. So I'm curious, you know, when you talk about providing all of that insight to each person, I mean, this sounds like really important things for everyone to know. Like, one, can you do that sort of kinesthetics evaluation? That can all happen virtually. And then the other question is like, how do you, when you're providing, it sounds like a lot of like high touch with each customer. When you're talking about working with a company that has 1,000 employees and you're working on, you know, employee health, what is that going to look like for Fundamental Fitness Labs? Like a huge expansion in staff, or how do you envision that? Yeah,
both expansion in staff, but also, so there's 2 things. So when you look at the evaluation itself, it's we have a lot of, I guess you'd say we're really high touch on the front end, and then quarterly, right, we'd reevaluate. And then we're really going to be using everything from texts and emails to, you know, the back end machine learning to really pump out information to people on a consistent basis, right? So we're going to track you and email you and do follow-up stuff and we'll let you know up front. It might be a bot that's sending this to you, right? We're not trying to hide it, but if we tried to make it a human being every time, we couldn't afford to do it, right? And so there's that balance. But if people have questions that the system doesn't answer, then it gets shot up to a human to answer so that we actually engage people. So that's the first side. And then as far as the companies, we're really kind of nervous. In fact, one of the guys said we're going to end up with a sine curve kind of, you know, we get a company and a bunch of people come in, and then we have a little bit of a lull, then we get another one and a bunch of people come in, and you know, how do you balance that out? And we run all of our projections on 20% participation, right? So if we get 50%, that's going to really cause some issues, if you will, right? Obviously, if we get 10%, that's a different problem to have. But that's the idea, is that we don't believe up front that everyone's going to jump on. Now, and if a company says we'll pay for everybody, because you know there's different options, we're going to, you know, there's always the kind of the retainer fee, right? They're paying us every month to just do the events and do stuff. And a lot of people have wellness programs, but it's kind of a once-off dog and pony show, and then they kind of, good luck, and here's the app, right? We're going to have a lot more engagement with people to try to change their thought processes and behaviors and so forth. So we'll do seminars monthly, and if the company's big enough, maybe bi-weekly to do that. But from an individual standpoint, we'll find out how many individuals a wellness guide can handle at a time, right? So there's the person that's doing the evaluations, which is kind of like the doctor, if you will, and then there's the person that does the continual follow-up, right? And they have different skill sets, right? The people, and we didn't get into this on the call before, but our follow-up people are going to be all community health workers, right? So people that have an understanding of, trauma-informed care and that can meet people where they're at, that have a bend to do that kind of education and hand-holding is what people will need, right? Because if you're changing habits, you need someone to help you consistently so you change the habits.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's, and so the second part of the question is, yes, we could end up, and we've started already, we're starting on the recruiting process so that we can handle it if we do get overrun, so to speak, right? We're starting to build that pipeline of people that can help us do the work.
Cool. All right, I think we have one more question. I saw you being announced as one of TAO's sales community co-chairs. What about sales makes you passionate to share your expertise?
It's so, I guess there'd be three things. One, it's not as hard as people make it out to be, right? I mean, I think that's it. Secondly, it's critical to a company's success, right? So it's not as hard to make people make it out to be because it's about relationships, right? I've never told an inkling of a lie on any sales job I've ever had, right? Not everyone in sales acts that way, but I've been willing to talk to enough people that I'm not trying to convince you of anything, right? I'm finding what we're doing is looking for the people that see what we got. You have to be clear about what you have. But one of the things I was going to say to people is that, and it's funny that you brought this question up, is that if startups or anyone's looking for sales people or sales professionals, it's not about the guy or gal that can talk a lot. It's about the person who asks lots of questions and has a great ability to listen. And so for me, I'm just passionate about teaching people because it's a skill that can be taught. There's a kind of a science to it and there's an art to it, right? Which makes it kind of fun because you're dealing with humans. And I've had my best presentation ever and got a no. And I've had an awful presentation and got a close, right? So it's about both people in the environment, not just the salesperson. But it really is about listening. I think that's the hardest thing for people to understand is that I have conversations with people and I'm always listening to what you need, Ruthie, not what I want to sell you. Right. So if you come in my store and I was in for instance, if I'm on a car lot and I got hot rods and 2-seaters and you have a family, I'm going to send you down the street to my buddy that sells SUVs and minivans, right? And let you know that if you have a friend that needs a hot rod, they can come to me. Versus trying to convince you that you don't need to worry about the kids and everybody else, and it'll be fun just you in the in the hubby, right? That's not, and that's what people think sales is, right? Convincing people to buy the thing that they have. But I really believe it's matching people to finding the right people for what thing that you do have. And obviously, what we have is something everyone needs, so that's not a tough sell, so to speak. But finding the ones that really are interested in doing it versus ones that say they are. Right? People say they're interested in organizational wellness, but are they really willing to dedicate the opportunities and the time to make it work within their organization?
Yeah.
So, and then with the group here, with TAO, I mean, there's small companies, big companies. I just, I look at it as being of service, and I have a skill that people need, and if I can help them, it's going to make a huge difference, right? I've seen so many businesses. I saw a guy lose $1 million on a pub, right? Build all the equipment to make all the beer and didn't understand sales and just went out of business. And that's challenging. That's not cool. And if he had been willing, and that's part of the problem too, is people are so caught up in digital now. Oh, I'm just going to get a website. I'm just going to do this SEO, and everyone's just going to come to me. And it's like, even if they show up to you, you're still going to be able to close the deal transaction because you're probably not the only one in the marketplace. So I'm super excited, and we had some conversation about it and making sure that marketing and sales were separate. They obviously work together, and if a company doesn't understand the symbiotic nature, they're going to be in trouble on either side, right? But I would always say I would err to have quality sales versus impressive marketing. But I'm a sales guy, so of course I'd say that.
Yeah.
Marketing person would say just the opposite. So
right.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So I'm excited to see kind of how the group evolves, and as events kind of launch this year, it'll be cool to learn more about it. I know for myself, I always it's a learning process for sure. I feel pretty weird trying to sell stuff to people, and I'd love to learn more from you about that. So
Yeah.
I'll look forward to those events.
One of the things I learned early was you're always selling. You just don't realize it, right? If you and your partner are deciding where to go to dinner, and you want to go to a place and he doesn't want to go to that place, then there's a sales job going on, right?
Yeah.
And it's about asking questions. Well, what do you want to eat? Well, what do you like? Well, we haven't been here for a while, right? It's figuring out what the person needs to know to make the decision that you're hoping they make, right? Not what you want to tell them. I think, again, that's the challenge. Sometimes really early salespeople are super successful because they don't know anything. So they're not trying to say everything, and they're actually listening to the customer.
Got it.
And they get a bunch of knowledge and their sales go down, which seems backwards, but now they're talking too much, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to listening more. So, first rule of sales, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth. So listen twice as much as you talk.
Yeah. That's good advice, probably for everyone, regardless of whether or not.
Right. Well, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Right. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to answer these questions from the audience. So to wrap us up for today, thanks to those of you who joined us. Next month, our guest for the May I Am Tech Oregon is Anthony Zabo. He's a compliance program manager at Zapproved. And just a note for the May event, it's actually going to be on a Wednesday. So same time, but because of parenting responsibilities, Anthony asked if we could move over to Wednesday the 12th. So registration for that event is live at techoregon.org, and a registration link will go out with the feedback survey for today's event. So thank you again for joining us today. And remember, I am Tech Oregon, wishing everyone a beautiful Thursday. Have a great day.